And we're recording.
Great. All right, so call to order for this meeting. This is the April 23rd, 2020 meeting of the Easthampton Ranked Choice Voting Ad Hoc Committee. Using technology, pandemic technology here.
Hey, sorry to cut in. Owen just sent me a text. He says he has to restart Zoom, so he'll be right back.
Okay. All right, cool.
I assume we can get the sort of regular business done.
Yeah. So as much as I would love public speak, I don't see any members of the public other than Jeff is here, but Jeff is sort of a special guest. So we will skip over public speak for the time being. I don't know how these Zoom meetings work, but if a member of the public happens to come later on, we might accommodate them for that.
We have
so the next thing is the approval of minutes from last week. Did everyone here get a chance to look at last meeting, the minutes from the last meeting? And do we have a motion to accept them? Is that what we do? Accept the minutes? Yeah.
A motion to approve, yeah.
Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion.
second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed or abstaining? I think we can do this with, we can do this with 5. That's it. Enough. Great. Well, it's been a minute, so I appreciate all the differences that have come into play since we last met. I'm also very excited to continue ahead with our implementation work here. I think philosophically, there's a lot that can be said about voting that comes up as a result of a pandemic. And we've had a delayed election, and we have, I guess it's still on for May 13th, I think it is. Yeah, 19th, so 19th. Really interesting to see how that plays out. Since our first meeting, I think it was since our first meeting, I also had the opportunity to work at our previous primary election for the first time. And so that was great to be able to see how the machine gets set up, how it's organized and everything. And I got to talk to, God, I'm forgetting his name right now. He was the warden of precinct. Jeff, yes. I was like, it's not Jeff Silvestro, because a different Jeff. So anyway, we'll talk about him in a second, because I talked to him a little bit. So what I'd like to do to start with is our first old business is voting machine and vendor report. I had a fair amount of back and forth with Jeff, who's joining us here, and we can kind of follow up with that too. Do people have a copy of this little report that I sent out? It's sort of, most of it's in the form of a table.
It's great. This is amazing.
Cool, good. A lot of this is verbatim, what was sent back and forth between us. And my main goal with this was to really iron out, as I said on the front page here, what choices we have in terms of software and money. And as I suspected, based on our current machines and the licensing and the way those work with encryption, my conclusion from all this was that we don't really have any choice. But this is pretty much what we were all expecting, and that the amount of money is in line with also what we've been expecting for a long time. So this was good to answer a lot of the questions that I have. And before we talk about anything specific in that, Jeff, is there anything that you I don't know, you either have prepared or want to bring up with the committee or introduce yourself or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll introduce myself, talk to you about the company real quick. My name's Jeff Silvestro. I'm the owner and president of LHS Associates. We've been supporting your election systems for 20 plus years, I want to say at this point. We supported the old ActiveVote system. I'm not sure if we supported the system prior to that one as well. We may have that.
That being paper.
Oh, okay. Then no, it wasn't. It's hard when it goes back before my time. I'm left guessing sometimes. And obviously we're supporting the new system right now. The new system is absolutely capable of what you're looking to do. It's being used in other parts of the country right now. The version of firmware and software that we're kind of working with you on right now is actually the version that we designed for Cambridge to run their proportional representation elections, which we conducted successfully in November for the first time on this system. We had been running it for, quick math, I think 16 years previous on the system prior to this one. So we have a lot of experience working with Cambridge in their PR elections. I think transitioning that into ranked choice is going to be pretty seamless on our end. The biggest difference being that with ranked choice and this new software, we have the ability to go start to finish. So we'll be able to actually design your ballots, program your machines, help you implement your election, and then upload the data from the machines themselves to generate the winning reports. With the previous system, we were relying on a lot of third-party software to get the actual results of who the winners were. So it's nice now that we have that ability to kind of go from A to Z all in one package. You had mentioned decryption. Obviously, that's a big sticking point with a lot of people. They want that security, they want that comfort, and again, being able to go A to Z without passing data from one piece of software or one vendor to another vendor, it just allows that security to be in one straight line, which is really, it's a benefit of the system. The system itself, I sent over a ballot sample of what we could do as far as a layout. If there's any adjustments that need to be made, you guys can let me know. We can do our best. Major modifications may require some software tuning, which could come at a cost. But I think what you're looking for is pretty standard ranked choice voting. So I don't think there'd be a great deal of tweaking that we'd have to do to it. Beyond that, it's really, once the ballot is generated and the cards for the machine are programmed, the voters cast their votes, the machine scans the ballots just like they do right now, records the information. That information is held on the card in an encrypted state. It's then moved over to the software module where we upload that information into that software. And from that point, we need to discuss setting up a ranked choice profile. There's a lot of options and settings as far as how ties are broken, how votes are weighted, and it's probably easier, and I don't have it set up right now, but at some point down the line, we could set up a demo or get something, where you could see all the different choices. Because that's really my biggest concern as we go from town to town, is that you're going to want some form of weighting or some way of breaking ties or some way of looking at a previous round results before you go into the next one that the software doesn't have built into it. Okay. And that's where we would have to get into a software modification scenario. But if by chance everything we have built in there meets all of your expectations, then we're good to go with what you have. And it would just be an additional license on top of what you already have to have access to that ranked choice voting module.
What are the default, or what are the pre-built tie-breaking mechanisms that are already there?
I know there's a manual, and I believe there's a weighted from previous round, but I honestly, off the top of my head, I can't remember, and being not in the office, I don't have access to it.
Manual will be used for like coin flip or something like that.
Correct. Yep.
I have a quick question. With the possibility of the ballot question coming forth on the state level, if we make decisions locally, what is the chance that those might be overridden from a state level, and how will that cost come into play for reconfiguring perhaps what we've done but is now no longer acceptable?
Without knowing what the state gets into, it's hard to answer that. The ability to flip between firmware and software versions is very easy. I'll give Cambridge as the example again. We're certified at a 5.0 software and firmware level in the state. In order to conduct the Cambridge election, we have to upgrade them to a 5.9 version. The reason we don't do the whole state at 5.9 is because 5.9 is not yet federally certified, so we can't get it certified at the state level. But we went through a separate certification just for City of Cambridge elections, and we were able to get approval to use it for that specific election. So in talking to the Secretary of State's office, we would basically go through that same process with you so that you would be allowed to use that 5.9 software for your local elections, and then we would revert you back to 5.0 for your state elections. At some point down the line, we will have a 6.0 that is certified that will have everything involved in it, and we just won't have to do those software modifications between elections. We'll be able to run everything out of that one step.
I've heard too, Sarah, that as far as the state election, the ranking, if it gets down to a ranking, it won't be done locally. It may be actually picked up and taken to the state. So the only time we would be actually doing the ranking ourselves is at a local election. But yeah, having
sorry.
That makes sense, yeah.
is that correct?
Yeah, well, that's probably going to be true. I don't know the specifics of how the secretary will handle that, but I do know the ballot question that's likely to be on the ballot in November is for, it doesn't say anything about whether or not communities should perform RCV in their local elections.
It's only statewide.
It's only for the state elections. So whatever they set up, obviously, you know, we'd want to be as close in line just to make it consistent and easy to understand. But, you know, same thing, you know, we are home rule, and it's, you know, whatever the state decides to do is not necessarily bearing on what we decide to do. That might change if the state decides to, you know, there's been local option ranked choice voting bills introduced every year for a while. If something materialized on that, then that could change. But for now, like, I don't think that what happens on the statewide level really has any bearing on our municipal elections.
Jeff, can you talk a little bit about write-ins, how write-ins are dealt with?
Yeah, so there's two kind of ways to handle that, and that's a decision that you all, I guess, need to make. I'll give you the Cambridge example first. So what Cambridge does is anyone who fills in a write-in bubble, writes in a name, the machine actually rejects that ballot, and the voter puts it into a secure hand count compartment. So they have a separate blue box that the ballot would go into. We have what we call a day 2 process in Cambridge, where we come in the day after the election. The election commission reviews each one of those ballots to determine if the write-in is a valid write-in or a non-valid write-in. We then collect all of the valid write-ins and we calculate the final results. So the results that come out on Tuesday night in Cambridge are really very unofficial because we haven't done and tallied all of the ballots that have write-ins on them. So it's not until the end of day 2 where the actual results are posted for Cambridge. So we were able to have them actually remark those ballots based on whether the write-in is valid or not, and then rerun the algorithm to determine who the winner is. The way that we can do it in the system is to just count the write-ins as a write-in. And then as you run the algorithm, if you determine that write-ins have gotten enough votes to actually win, or would be one of the winners in a race, then you would have to go back and canvass those ballots to determine if they were all for the same person or if they were for different people. If they were for different people, you would have to get a count of how many for each person, and then we would have to manually enter that information to rerun the algorithms to determine if any of those write-ins were still viable candidates to be declared a winner.
Right.
So write-ins do get a little convoluted. Yeah, if it's just one candidate and we already know that write-ins got enough, and we can verify that that person's name was written in on all those ballots, then that person can be declared a winner. But again, if it's maybe one person got 10 votes and another person got 20 and another person got 5, now all of a sudden the weighting gets thrown off because, yeah, write-ins got enough ranks total, but one person didn't get enough ranks total. So we'd have to adjust that manually in the software and then rerun the algorithm. But what a lot of people have told me is you do it first pass, and if write-ins don't even have enough to be part of the equation, then you don't even need to go back and look at them again. But that's really the decision you guys have to make.
I like that.
Oh, go ahead. Is there a particular reason that Cambridge decided not to do it that way?
Other than it's the way they've always done it, I'm not sure.
Okay, inertia.
It's a terrible process.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of maybe unnecessary time spent.
Well, we spent an entire week preparing for the election. We spent about an 18-hour day processing the election, and then had to wake up first thing the next morning and spend another 16 hours going through all the ballots. So,
yeah,
I lost some hair that day. Yeah.
Gosh.
It's very unusual for a write-in to have enough. I mean, it very, very unusual. Yeah,
Owen.
Well, I'm just thinking stream of consciousness here, so I'm just trying to do kind of the math and the algorithm in my head. But the write-ins might not have enough, but the number 2s might be important in that scenario. Am I wrong?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you could find yourself in a situation where the write-ins, if there were two candidates and then a bunch of write-ins, there might be a situation where the write-ins, like who their second choice is, really matters. And if they're all for the same person, then that might actually be important too. But, if one candidate that's on the ballot wins, wins outright, then you don't need to count it. If one candidate, in plenty of situations, it becomes like if the write-ins don't have enough votes to have even if they're all for the same person, have a chance of reaching the majority, then, it doesn't really matter who they're for.
Right. There's an equation in there somewhere, but it's somewhat complicated. Yeah.
The other option, and we see this in some states, and I'm not sure you have the ability to do it in Massachusetts, is to require write-ins to be qualified write-ins, registered write-ins, for them to even be counted on the ballot.
I don't think that we do that.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Right. Usually the write-ins are just a smattering of people, and the people in precinct 4 who write their names in every single time. It's, they do.
Jeff, I had a question for you. This came up in our last meeting about when there are 2 candidates in a race. So obviously, if there's one candidate and it's an uncontested race, you have that candidate and the write-in line, and there's no reason to have ranked choice come into play. But if there's 2, we were sort of very, very preliminarily as a committee talking about whether we would want a ballot to have a 3-way RCV with one write-in line, or not in that sort of case. In other ballots or communities that you've worked with, when there's 2 candidates plus a write-in line, do they usually have that displayed as a RCV ballot to voters, or will they keep it as a
Not generally, unless they know that a candidate missed a filing deadline and is going to have a write-in campaign, in which case you could have a valid write-in campaign, candidate, excuse me, and you would probably want to keep it as a ranked race.
Right.
But really, yeah, if you only have 2 candidates, I mean, and there isn't a strong write-in candidate, and I'm not really sure what the value is there.
Right.
That our charter language does say that as long as there's 2, there should be a write-in line. And I think that was something that I was advocating for, because I just felt there was like kind of this edge case where maybe you got two candidates and the week before the election, there's some sort of scandal and there's a strong write-in. And suddenly you have a real chance of sort of a spoiler candidate. It does look like in the test, the sample ballot you sent in the district city councilor line, it does look like you have, yeah, two candidates and then write-in.
Yeah, it absolutely can be done. It's just a question of whether or not you want to do it.
So Jeff, on election night, if we had a situation like that with two people on a ballot with a write-in, and at the end of the night, you know, it looks like one of them definitely won. I mean, I usually just bring them back and I put it into a spreadsheet. I mean, what would happen? How would that work?
So you bring the memory card back, you'd keep the tape. The tape itself will have all the first place winners, or first place votes, excuse me. So, I mean, if there's 200 total votes and someone gets 101 first place votes, and there's only two candidates or even three candidates, I guess you pretty much already know that that person has won the seat. But you probably want to go through the process anyway. So it's a matter of just opening that software module, very simple, going in and activating the ranked choice profile, which I talked about with the settings, and we would predetermine that ahead of time. And then you take that compact flashcard and just stick it into the card reader, hit start. It's going to pull that information up. Once you verify that all the precincts have been entered, you hit a report and publish button. You go into that ranked choice module and press calculate, and it's going to actually run the algorithm, and it'll display round by round. So it'll show you your first round, and it'll show you all the first place totals. And then it'll go into the second round if it has to, and display all the first place totals. And as it goes round and round, if we get into a tiebreaker scenario, as I talked about before, it's going to allow you to choose the tie if it's a manual choice, or it will show you based on what you've predetermined in the profile how the tie was determined. So that is, it's pretty good graphical interface to show you if you wanted to project it up on a screen or something, each round how it's going. You can predetermine, so instead of just going round, 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 it'll actually go around and pause, and you have to hit a button before it goes to the second round.
That's
so
cool.
some good, yeah, there's some good settings that it seems pretty basic, but it's actually something that people really appreciate having. That it doesn't just, you know, because you want to explain. People have questions if they're there. And then, you know, at the end of it, there's a lot of audit logs and things that we can dump out to show you exactly how votes were reassigned. Dan, I think I sent some of that to you.
Yep.
So you can see a demonstration of that.
Did I send, did people get a zip file of that sample material, or have I not sent that out? I don't remember.
I got a lot of stuff from you.
Which sample material?
Say that again, please.
I didn't see any logs.
Okay, I'll make sure that that goes out to the committee, the sample data from Amherst, because that includes logs and reports. So it's good to see.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick, Dan, if you want me to touch on that real quick, where we're at with Amherst. So we went through the actual demonstration ballot design with them already. We printed ballots, sent them to Amherst. We had the committee actually hand mark the ballots and then do a manual tally of how the results should be determined. They then sent the ballots back to us. We ran them through the machine. And now I'm just waiting for them to give me their option settings for that ranked choice profile so that I can run the software and demonstrate to them that our software comes out with the same tally as their, same as their manual tally.
Cool.
Jeff, can you explain the manual count? So I would assume that would be how I would have to do the test ahead of time. How would I do my test?
Do you want the real answer? I mean, what Cambridge done is they run just like it is on election day. They run through the software, and that set of results becomes their test results. And there's no real hand manual tally to match up against that.
Ooh. I don't think you can do, I don't think you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to do a hand marking of the ballots and test it.
When you have 11 or 12 candidates in your school committee race and you have 26 candidates in your city council race, it would take you probably longer than you have before the election to actually do a manual based on their PR rules. What I've seen people do for recounts is almost set up like a mail grid, like a Cubby system. And you have round one with all your first place, second place, third place, fourth place, and you actually put the ballots into based on how they're voted.
How
And then you
Ireland does
pull
it.
them, exactly, you pull them out of that stack and you do a count on that and you make a record of how all the first round votes were tallied, and you're able to declare who a winner was if there was one in the first round. If there isn't, then you can eliminate the stack of people that didn't have enough. You redistribute those as you go into the second column of the Cubby, and you match everybody up that way. Then you pull them out one at a time and you make your count. So there is a way to manually do it. Some people just do it on tables. I think the Cubby visually is just a little bit easier to understand. You're not going to have enough candidates that it would be too overwhelming to set up a little system like that. If you had, like I said, Cambridge, 26 candidates running for one race, it's probably too much to do. But there are ways to do it. I would understand, Cambridge has done this since 1992. So, they're pretty astute as far as marking things in a specific way to test for certain things. And if there's a big problem, they can tell right away. Whereas you guys are just getting into this and want to be comfortable with it, I would absolutely assume that you would do some sort of manual count ahead of time.
Barbara, is there, you said that the hand count is mandated. Is there a certain number of ballots that is also mandated? I mean, is it 10 or 100 or 1,000 or?
Yeah. Well, for state elections, we have to count 50 ballots.
50, okay.
Like for a primary, it's 50 for each party. For a city election, I don't do quite as many, but I do like 20 some per precinct, and I run them, I mark them, I hand count them, and then I run through the machine to make sure it matches. So I guess that's what I was wondering, especially because we're going to have a mixed ballot. We're going to have some ranked choice voting and we're going to have some regular. I just want to make sure that the machine is reading everything correctly, and that when we run it through, we're supposed to do it. And
Well, what Cambridge does is they make sure that every candidate gets at least one vote in every rank.
Right.
So they have a method for how they mark their ballots that allows them, and they end up with way more than 50 ballots. I mean, we're talking hundreds of ballots.
Mm-hmm.
But they're checking every first place rank works. They're making sure that there's no rejects in places where there shouldn't be rejects. So verifying that the machine's reading the ballots correctly. They mark ballots incorrectly to make sure that the machine is notifying the voter if there was a duplicate rank or a multi-vote scenario. They want to make sure that, they reject, like I said, write-in ballots. They want to make sure any ballot that has a write-in on it is rejected from the machine and that the message on the display is correct. They actually do the same thing with any ballot that's completely blank.
Mm-hmm.
They reject that, and that goes into the day 2 totals as well. So
I think we do that now, right?
Right. Well, I always overvote some, and I always, make sure that it knows it's an overvote. That's the main thing right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I meant when a voter during the election casts a blank ballot,
Pops it back.
It pops it back out, right?
Yes.
Do you need to do this for every machine, Barbara, or just once?
I do it for every precinct. Yep.
Every machine at every, oh yeah, I guess, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it's the cards. Yeah. I put the cards into the same, into each top. Yes.
Yeah.
Jeff, I was looking at some of the Democracy Suite documentation, and it looks like part of that software has an ability to do visual audits of the scanned ballots. So you can sort of tab through each one, and instead of shuffling paper around, you see the markings on them, and then you see how the software interpreted those markings. Is that something that we'd have access to? Either in the election or doing this testing?
You would need clarification in the testing. Absolutely. You'd need clarification from the state on that. So by state guidelines, we have to shut that feature off for your normal elections, your state elections, presidential, whatnot. We were given a pass because really to make this work, that feature has to be turned on because it's how the machine retains and takes all that information into account. We were given a pass to allow that saving of the ballot images to remain turned on in Cambridge, so long as we deleted all that information as soon as we had all of the results determined. So they just don't want it being publicly disseminated out into the world. That's a discussion we have to have with them.
That is something we could certainly use in the validation process beforehand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. If you wanted me to send you ballots to mark to do a hand count like we did with Amber, send them back to me. When I ran them through and sent you the files afterwards, instead of sending those ballots back so that you could verify I ran the actual ballots, I could just dump all the images and you'd have everything right there electronically. Yes.
Cool. Because it looked to me like the software made it really easy to just kind of flip through them and say, oh, this one was interpreted correctly. And
I've seen states and counties where if they do a recount, they'll actually throw those images up on a big screen
on a
for the people that are in the room. Yep. So that you can see the ballots that they're looking at.
Cool. I think I saw Tom's hand up a little while ago. Did you have another thing, or?
I did, but I don't remember. Oh, I think it was actually, I think you've sort of covered this, but is the output from the rankings and how those go, is that sent out in a way that would be easy to sort of turn into a visualization that the public could easily digest or that the candidates could digest?
I think so, but I'd have to double check on that.
I've just seen in a lot of places that do ranked choice voting things being like, oh, and then 30% of like this candidate was eliminated and 30% of their supporters went to this candidate and 20% didn't rank another one and the others went over here. And I feel like as like an elected official, there's something really enticing about that because if you win, you get a sense of what your coalition actually is. Like, here's the people who like, oh, this opponent of mine, turns out that a lot of his supporters ranked me second. You know, that kind of, that's just, I think it's valuable kind of information.
It's definitely valuable, and it's valuable in the negative too, that you know who a candidate knows who they didn't get. So if the environment candidate lost, or didn't make it to the next round and their second choice was, say, I can't come up with an example, but you know who you lost. And I think that's important for everyone in the process, not just the electeds, because everyone can figure out who they're, who's in the same coalition. It's a good point.
Owen?
I agree with those points. I also just think from a transparency perspective, it's a great thing to have available to the public because they're going to have questions about, especially in a ranked choice election where there's not a clear-cut first round winner or there's transfers, in the second round that cause ultimately a victory for someone that wasn't winning coming out of the first round. I think it's valuable to be able to have that data available when people come asking for it.
I don't think there's any question that the data will be public and available. I think the question is more, does the software have a way of visualizing it in a way that's either interactive or pretty or automatic? Because correct me if I'm wrong, both Jeff and Barbara, but all of the round data would be certainly made public. I mean, am I correct?
Yeah, those logs that I sent you. Yeah. Those logs that I sent you were an example of something that you would post for public.
Right.
That would allow people to go back and almost recreate the election round by round.
Yeah.
As far as something clean and visual that, the other 80% of us could understand, I'm not sure beyond that visual that's on the screen that I had described before. I don't know if there's a way to export that. That's something I'd have to check on.
Cool. In my experience with the Universal RCV tabulator, there's some nice visualization websites that let you just upload the audit log or
Yes.
the result JSON of that. And you get this nice interactive thing with charts and rounds and graphs, and it's very, very pretty and user-friendly. And I did not read the entire docs of Democracy Suite because it was hundreds and hundreds of pages, but I thought that I saw something that was sort of like a visual report that at least had
And there's
colors and graphs and rounds and things like that.
3 additional export formats. And again, that's how we do it for Cambridge. We actually export into Choice Pro Plus, and they're able to run the data. And then they have another gentleman who has a custom software suite that he's built for the city. So if you go on their website or on election night, all of that live reporting with the pretty charts and graphs and stuff is all that additional work that's being done kind of on the back end.
Choice Pro Plus is pretty, when I looked into it, it looked pretty abandoned in terms of development. Is it something that Cambridge now operates? Do they develop it themselves?
No,
as a town, or
they contract with a gentleman named Caleb Kepner, I believe. I can't remember the name of this company, but he comes in every year. I believe he does the same thing for Portland, Maine. And he runs the end result, and he pretties up the documents. Trying to remember the other gentleman's name who does the software. It's slipping me. But there's a lot of people who, Cambridge has been doing this for a long time, like I said. So, they've got a lot of experience doing it. And I know Choice Pro Plus is open source, or Choice Plus Pro. I always get those, whatever.
Sort of. The licensing is a little odd. It's free, sort of. It was a few months ago that I looked at it, but
yeah, it may look somewhat abandoned, but that just may be because Caleb has taken it on his own and kind of does his own thing with it and runs his own version by himself.
Okay.
Again, that's beyond my step in the process, so I don't really pay attention to it.
I think Tom's question is great, and if you could let us know what you find out in terms of its output reporting. I mean, some of that exporting stuff, we can take it once Democracy Suite has run everything, we can export that into a format that we as a committee or as a town or we can figure out some tool of making that pretty in the way that it's posted. And that doesn't necessarily mean animated. It can simply be a presentation, and we can decide how we want to present it in terms of a table, and there's good examples of that on Wikipedia. If you look at Burlington, of how you can present multiple rounds, even when there's a confusion and there's a change of who's leading after the first round and the second round. And you can make that very clear to voters how it works.
Yeah.
But it was important to me that we could export from this program. And it sounds like we certainly can. So
just real quick, because I see a couple hands. That's a perfect example, though. If that is something you want and we can't do it, or the format that we're exporting in is not in the format that jives with whatever software you want to do to create those kind of visual reports, that's something we would need to make a modification on, and we'd have to talk about what that would entail.
I think you mentioned that it outports to BLT, though.
Correct. Yep.
So BLT is a very, very, very simple human readable format that's very
perfect.
easy to parse.
I just wanted to throw that in there because we had to do that for Cambridge with the Choice Plus Pro. Was to create that export format just for that.
Yep. So I see Owen, Barbara, and Chris, I think, had hands.
My question was answered.
Oh, it was answered. Okay. So Barbara?
So I just want you to kind of remember in your head that we're not Cambridge, and I don't have the staff. It's basically just me. And I think that whatever we do has to be very simple, and it has to be simple.
Yeah.
And we're not going to be spending, you know, the money that Cambridge is spending on modifications. I think we just need to keep this like basic and simple. You know, and maybe there won't be everything that every techie person out there wants, but remember, it's just me, basically. So just keep that in mind.
Just based on the contest that you're talking about running this for, the potential number of candidates we're probably going to see in these contests, and the fact that they're all vote for one, right? They're all single winners.
Yes.
Yeah, this is, I mean, a cakewalk compared to Cambridge. So I'm not, even compared to Amherst. Amherst wants to run this for every single contest they have on their ballot. I mean, just the ballot layout itself is going to be a nightmare. So really what you're talking about doing is not going to be very difficult.
Owen?
Oh, I was just fidgeting. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Tom, did I see your hand up for a sec?
Yeah, something just came to mind, just for the benefit of the committee. I do think that when we're doing this, when we're talking about options, the option where we have to sort of press a button to continue to the next round is going to be necessary, because our charter does stipulate that in the case of a tie, that it should be decided by a coin flip. And I don't know, maybe somebody disagrees with me. Obviously, the charter was not necessarily written with this in mind, but without changing that to stipulate that we do something different in the case of ranked choice voting, I think that in the case that there was a tie, we'd have to go with that and do a coin flip. So the ability to say, all right, let's pause this till we can, you know, presumably you'd want the candidates or somebody designated by the candidates to witness that or something. I don't know.
Manual tiebreak is the default setting, and
Okay.
even if you don't have a round by round, it will stop immediately on a tiebreak. So it's not going to move past that until you determine who the person being eliminated is. So again, I like, and I think you appreciate having to hit a button to go to the next round. It just slows the process down and makes it easier for people to digest. But no matter what, in any situation, it sounds like manual is going to be your default. It is the default in the software. It's going to stop as soon as that, and you have to physically declare the person being eliminated before it moves on to the next round.
That was actually one of my things. I was a little worried that whether we were going to need some sort of special modification. So that's a relief for me.
Overall, my impression is that we can do this, in, you know, based on what the committee feels are the right decisions, and what the charter says and what our ordinance will say, without doing anything that would require custom additional expenses. That's what I mean, and that is something that I feel like is important for us, at least at the very beginning, based on our human resources and our financial resources. But there isn't anything so far that's been a red flag that says like, oh, this is really going to haunt us. I think we can really streamline this to go with what's already built in, which is quite a lot. Yeah, Barbara.
So talking about the ordinance kind of leads into my next question. Jeff, I was wondering, I mean, we have to write an ordinance for this, and I think it should be as simple, I think we've talked about this before, as simple as possible. And Jeff, I was wondering if you had any places that we could use as a template. Dan, I know you have some already, but Jeff, I was wondering if you have any that are really designed to work with what we have. Any cities or?
You could talk to Portland. We don't run their elections, so I don't know how similar that is.
Do they have ES&S?
They do. The whole state of Maine runs ES&S for their state ranked choice. So the state of Maine might have some stuff. We ran one election, I want to say it was 15 or 16 years ago, maybe, in Burlington. I'm not sure if they have any records of what the ordinances were when they ran that.
Do you know what has Amherst started working on their actual ordinance at all, or are they still?
I honestly don't know, because I haven't talked to them in about a month now, maybe a month and a half. And they actually don't even have machines that are capable of running. So part of their process is determining how to write an RFP along with writing an ordinance and, coming up with their whole
Do
methodology.
they not have the ICPs yet?
No.
Oh.
Mm.
Is Santa Fe? I remember that one being
Yep.
one city.
Santa Fe is one as well. I'm trying to think who else.
Minneapolis, I think.
That's
Minneapolis that uses the ESNS.
Yes.
Again, though, I mean, ranked choice is kind of ranked choice. You can pull those, the ordinances the way they've written them and
Okay.
take a look at what you're,
Right.
attempting to come up with. And I wouldn't think there'd be big variations based from vendor to vendor.
I just wonder how much really has to be in the ordinance. I mean, really, I just, it seems like the simpler the better.
Yeah, I agree with that too. However, I do think the ordinance needs to cover things like tie breaking, previous round elimination, basically these things that go into the profile that's created. I think that is something that we do need to dig into each one of those. I have a item to talk about those a little later this meeting, and I feel like we're not really going to get into the weeds of them this meeting. But part of what I want to do for our future meetings is to come up with a definitive list of those things that have an impact on the results of the election, so that this committee can decide one by one exactly what our profile looks like. And really using the software as a guide for that, because these are the things that are required in order to do the final calculation.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, like, if Jeff, if you can guide us into those kind of things, so we're not like creating things that aren't going to work with the software.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the next step probably is for me to send you a screenshot of what the choices are in that profile. And then we can have a discussion on, you might look at it and say, okay, points IRV is not something that we're talking about here. We want to use a standard IRV as our step-by-step scenario. We want to do the manual tie break. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what some of the other settings are. There's 4 or 5 actual drop-down lists where you have 2 or 3 choices for each of those things. And then there's a series of check boxes where you can kind of toggle something on or toggle something off. It's a lot. It's been a while since I saw it, so I honestly can't remember. But it'd be easy to take a screenshot, send that to you, and just we could have a discussion about it.
I was gonna try and share a screen. I don't think it's enabled on this, but of the Universal RCV Tabulator's rules column, because it's a nice compact thing of tiebreak mode, overvote rule, winner selection mode, number. It's that whole profile, and you can almost go one by one down that and make those decisions like a checklist. Which if you could send us a screenshot of that in the Democracy Suite software, that would be great for guiding our discussion on that.
Right, because at that point we can basically just go through and that, since we're not going to be talking about really considering any major technology, that list is the changes that we need to stipulate in the ordinance.
Yep.
Like that's the content of the ordinance, is saying,
Okay.
we do it, we're talking about this thing, not that thing. And when this thing happens, we're handling it this way and not that way. So that, the public is aware that in any of these particular situations, here's what you can expect to happen.
Right. How we deal with skipped ranks, how many skipped
Sure.
ranks, et cetera. Yeah.
Right, because that's really the only thing. I just, I think that it's really important that the public knows exactly what, or that they have the ability to learn exactly what to expect going into the election.
Yes.
And there isn't the sense that any of these, just because of the level of like trust in public entities right now, frankly,
Yeah.
reasons that have nothing to do with us, but are somewhat well-founded. Like there's, just the sense that like none of this was made up on the fly, like long before any candidate pulled papers. Here is what we decided is how we would administer these things, and that's how they're going to run.
Yep. I want to make note that we're getting close to 7 p.m. here, and so I would just want to, while we have Jeff here for this meeting, I mean, Jeff, I don't know what your availability is like, but if you'd be
Like most
willing,
of you, I'm not going anywhere.
yeah, right. We're all stuck at home, but just in the coming months, if we have, I mean, you've been incredibly responsive, both to Barbara and to my outreach to you. I'm really grateful for that. You know, it pains me a little bit that we don't seem to have, you know, really any choices if we want to continue using these machines. The counter to that is that the machines are so far so good, and that you as a vendor have been super responsive and detailed and knowledgeable about this and available. And so I just really appreciate that, and it makes the world of difference about to this process. So
and I have to say that LHS has always been like that, right from when we first hired them back in '96. So
cool.
I'm always very, very thankful for that.
We always say we deal with a lot of unknowns, and the way that we can respond to things is literally the only thing we can control. So that's what we put our emphasis on. When is your next meeting? Just so I can try and get some of this information done.
We have not scheduled it, but my guess is that it'll probably be a month from now. It'll be next month.
With Connecticut pushing their presidential primary to August and Rhode Island pushing theirs till June, I've definitely had more ability to kind of focus on this than I was expecting. So
August? They're going
long. Yeah, they originally went June 2nd, and then the governor last week pushed it to coincide with their state primary on August 11th.
I'm glad we were done in the beginning of March.
Yeah,
me too.
Although with there's not much of a contest, so it's sort of a formality at this point to do a presidential primary, right?
Because the withdrawal deadlines had passed and they still have names on the ballot, so they have to theoretically run it. So really, I understand why they did it. You merge it with an election you already had scheduled, and it's going to cut the cost tremendously for them.
Yep. Cool. So before we move on, well, we have Jeff here. Are there other questions that anybody has, or?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
It's not directly pertinent, but you know, if at some future point we start talking about using this for our multi-winner races, so our school and our at-large city councilor races, would that require a whole lot of extra outside of, I know you said the ballot layout is sort of tricky, but this system set up that it could handle that without a whole lot of fuss?
Absolutely, yeah. It's just a matter of saying we're doing a vote for 2 versus a vote for 1, or a vote for 3 versus a vote for 1, and the system's all equipped already to make those determinations. And again,
so you've got like all the parameters about how you handle those sorts of things baked in. Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah, really the layout's the trickiest part when you start doing a lot of these, because especially if they're matched up with the plurality vote, because you're going to have a block that goes way out, and then you're going to have this little tiny race, and then you're going to have a block that's not as big but a little bigger, and then a little tiny race. And it just, the visual aspect of the ballot, it really looks very convoluted, and you lose a lot of layout real estate too, so it ends up making the ballots longer. We can't go front to back. That's the other thing. There's no way of doing a 2-sided ballot with this. The system has set up so that where the ovals line up on the front, if you run a race or contest on the back, it will not let you match those ovals front to back. So if you use a heavy marker and it bleeds through, we don't have to worry about people accidentally voting for a candidate on the back of the ballot without being aware of it. So when we have single winner races, we can do 3 or 4 columns on the front and do the same number of columns on the back and not have to worry about those ovals matching up. When you're talking about these ranked choice grids where you have many ovals going across, it's almost impossible to not have something match up on the back. So the system will not allow us to make a 2-sided ballot. So the more information you have, the more contests, the more questions, the longer the question language is, the ballot's just going to get longer and longer and longer. Or we need to talk about going to a 2-page ballot, where maybe we have all of your ranked choice on one ballot, your single winner contests on the second ballot, and maybe a third ballot for your questions.
So Jeff, right now, with the fact that we just have the single winner races, I mean, is it still possible for us to have a double-sided ballot the way it is? No, not at all.
As soon as I tell it that we're doing one ranked choice race, it will not allow us to
that's
push
it.
anything to the backside. That's it.
All right. That
We can still do multiple columns. So again, if it's, you know, only maybe 3 or 4 choices in that contest, we may have room to do another one and do them side by side, so that we're not just running one contest down the first column. There may be some ways to visually lay that out better. But as soon as I say ranked choice to any of those contests, it's not going to allow me to put anything on the back.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed the sample one you made has the 2 single winner ones side by side.
Side by side. Yep.
Good to know.
Is there a length limit to the ballot, either by law or logistically?
Not by law, but the parameters are, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, so forgive me, I might get them wrong at the end. It's 11, 14, 17, 18, 19, 20, and I think 21 to 22 inches. But to be honest, once you go past somewhere 18 to 20, you really want to talk about doing a 2-page ballot at that point, because it's just this massive piece of paper, and
And
the voters.
Also, our,
CVS receipts, so.
yeah, also our ballot boxes that we use are only, I don't know, the long state ballots, that's all they fit. So
Okay, so that's probably our functional limit.
yeah, we'd need.
I like to use 18 as the cutoff. We could go to 20 if we had to, but again, the longer you get, you know, the more chances of them getting torn in delivery or transport to the polling place, the voter tearing them by accident in voting in the voting booth. Your absentees you have to think about too. When you get to that long, the number of folds that have to go onto an absentee ballot make it very difficult for that ballot to accurately go through the machine without, you know, being rejected for errors. So we really like to keep things at an 18 max if we have that ability.
Is there any reason to not? What's the pushback from going to 2-page ballots? Is it just the printing costs, Barbara?
Well, I can tell you, and I think Dan can tell you about this.
Yeah.
Is that unfortunately the machines that we use are slow. And when because we just went through this with the state primary and the special state primary, people want to put 2 ballots through, boom, boom, really fast. And the machines are slow. And we actually had issues with 3 out of the 5 machines because, you know, it's people just want to put them in too fast. So if every single voter has 2 ballots, it is not fun, right, Dan?
Yeah, and in fact, the precinct that was in the school next to the precinct that I was working in, we got a really big backup on this during this primary, and it wasn't people waiting to vote; it was people having voted waiting to put them into the machine, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that for every single person there were 2 pieces of paper, you know, and putting in the absentee ballots as well, kind of in between everybody. There's a lot of like, it's in, okay, we're waiting to see that it says ready for the next one.
And I'll just touch on that real quick so you don't have any false expectations. As soon as you go to ranked choice, you're gonna see about 3 to 4 seconds more than what you're seeing right now. And that was an issue we had in Cambridge because they run each of their contests on a separate ballot. So everyone gets handed a school committee ballot and they get handed a second city council.
Oh my God.
So it was taking some people, and again, they have many more candidates and many more ovals than you're talking about, but you know, people were reporting it was taking them 45 seconds total to get the 2 ballots through. And we ended up having to dispatch some second machines to precincts just to make sure we had the ability to process everybody before 8 o'clock at night. So that is something we need to consider as, you know, you think about these things.
Chris, did you have a follow-up to that?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay. So it's sometimes hard to tell when people are.
We're all learning.
Yeah, Zoom. I mean, if it was up to me, I'd love, I hope that we can resume in-person meetings at some point.
We could stand in the
even if-
parking lot and shout at each other.
Yeah, even if we're 6 feet apart, but for now, I am grateful that we can do it this way at all.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to move on. So Jeff, I
Okay.
super appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome to stay as long as you want. But
I'm gonna gracefully bow out and go eat dinner. So
okay, great.
thank you for having me.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
coming.
coming and for giving us this time. And it's fantastic.
Okay, take
All right.
care.
We'll be in touch. Yeah. Great. So, right. So the sample, the next thing I have on here is the sample election materials. So I'm going to send that out after this meeting. I have a zip file. It's audit logs and things like that. So if any of you want to take a look at that stuff, I'll make it available right after this meeting. I don't think there's a lot of discussion on that because we have sort of already or have not had a chance to look at it yet. Implementation. So during the primary, I talked to Jeff about this a little bit, and he expressed, Jeff, not Jeff who just got off the phone, but
Yeah.
Jeff, the warden, and he expressed a willingness to speak to the committee, just as somebody who has another person aside from Barbara who has on the ground knowledge of running these elections. I don't know necessarily that I have any direct questions for him or any of the other wardens, but I was happy that he seemed excited and making himself available to the committee, and I could see us soliciting some input from wardens at some point if people feel like that's a good idea. I don't think we're there yet, but I just thought I'd report that he seemed excited about that. So
Yeah, it seems like a good idea because things like the voting time is not something that we really have any experience with aside from Barbara and now you. And hearing the backup with the 2 ballots is very interesting.
The person who was helping me to feed in my ballots into the machine, I fed in the first one, and as it was feeding in, he was like, "Now give me 20 push-ups."
I know who you were. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, that was fun. I didn't do 20 push-ups though.
But my point is, I guess, that I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other stuff that logistically we're just not thinking of, and it'll be good to have him here.
I think the thing about the wardens is they're probably not going to see a whole lot of difference, except there might be questions on how to fill out the ballot. But as far as what they actually do at the polls, it's really not going to be that much different. It's going to be more different on the me at the end of the night. But as far as people getting the ballots and voting and putting them in the machine, it's really not going to be any different. I think that there just may be questions from voters like, oh, how do I do this?
Right.
So I think education will be important more than the actual election day process.
Right. And so maybe some of that is our committee doing some education work.
Right.
The wardens going in the other direction so that they're confident because they're going to be the ones who are getting questions.
We'll need to do education for the wardens about how the new ballot is, how people mark the ballot.
Yeah.
But as far as their actual process, I don't think they're really going to see much of a difference.
Right.
How many wardens are there? Are there 2 or are there 5 or something?
No, each precinct has a warden.
Okay, so it's not location, it's precinct. I think maybe we should, maybe one of our last meetings, just have everyone involved in one of these meetings. And so we can just get all questions answered and
True.
maybe even sooner.
Yeah.
Is it the same wardens every year, Barbara?
Yes.
Recently? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, Owen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it wouldn't hurt to poll them, I guess no pun intended, ahead of time, just to make sure that they don't have any concerns about the process, either, erroneous or, legitimate, just to make sure that we're not missing anything in regards to how this is being implemented. So,
Yeah.
Cool. Next, I wanted to check in with Tom. Have you had any response from the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center or any sort of contact with them at all?
Nothing formal.
Okay.
I think that I kind of when I saw all the stuff from Jeff that you sent, I forget if it was you or Barb that sent it shortly after the meeting. I sort of held back until I got a sense of like what our actual, until we got a chance as a committee to really discuss what we might need from them.
Yeah.
I
think that's smart.
I don't know where you guys are, but for me, I feel like this meeting was very clarifying because it sounds like Jeff is going to be able to give us a really good sense of what the actual decisions we need to make are.
Mm-hmm.
And then one thing I might want to talk to the RCV Resource Center about is either just doing a review of our ordinance to make sure that we're not, that there's not some like glaring hole that we're missing.
Yeah.
And also seeing if they have any sort of thoughts on educational material and like sort of what on a very limited budget the city could do to make sure that people are getting the right information about things, because I know they've done a little bit of that. And then sort of following up to see if they actually would be, when we were initially talking about this, they were saying that if we were interested, they'd be willing to send somebody up to like provide direct support on election night, which I guess we'd want to see whether, we'd want to talk internally about whether or not that's something that would actually be valuable. Also, at the time that it was passed, that they said that, I don't know if they were aware that New York City was also going to be doing this. So I'm not sure their resources are going to be slightly.
Yeah, they kind of stole our thunder.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, yeah, that was I'm so happy for New York City, but also like New York City and also Easthampton, like all the ranked choice voting people who are like the national advocates were like, yeah, New York City and Easthampton. So like, it was, but yeah, it's fine. It's not what this is about.
I like the idea of
glory. Glory of Charter Review Committee.
Yeah.
I like the idea of reaching out to them with some specific asks, like, can you give us some feedback on the state of our ordinance? Can you give us some feedback on voter outreach and ideas around that?
Yeah.
So I think holding off on that for the time being is fine.
I might just reach out to Chris Hughes just to say hi, because he's a cool guy and I haven't talked to him in a while.
Cool.
Without any, just to sort of let him know where we are, but with no specific requests, but just to let him know that that might be coming in a few months.
So the next item on our agenda is really that particular list, and so I'm gonna more or less table this, but this is the kind of thing that we're gonna have to go through one by one, especially once we get those images from LHS about what these settings particularly are. But in the draft ordinance that I started, that you guys all have copies of too, some of that stuff is in there as sort of a template. But it'll be nice to have it be complete with everything we know we need to decide. But this includes things like skipped ranks, tie-breaking methods, which it sounds like there's not going to be a whole lot of discussion about that because we pretty much know what we're going to do. The write-ins, yep, how we deal with write-ins and whether there's 2 or 3 candidates running for it to be an RCV election, and also batch elimination. My understanding about batch elimination is that it doesn't have any bearing on the results.
Right.
As in, if you do it or you don't do it, you're still going to get the same winner every time mathematically. But again, it's something that we can talk about as a committee. I think that we should table that until we get the definitive list of the things that we have to kind of just go down one by one.
That makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that concrete list is going to help us make our decisions. And, you know, I think once we have that, we'll be able to move pretty expediently.
Yeah, I think so too. And some of those decisions are more than just technical, in the sense that skipped rank, how you deal with skipped ranks is sort of a more
It's also
voter intent philosophical question of, you know, not disenfranchising people, but also not
tying yourself
reading it. Yeah, not tying yourself in knots, but also not reading into their votes and interpreting them in a way that's not what their intent was. So, but anyway, I think that's a good thing for a future meeting. So there's kind of two more things on here, and I know that we're at 7:15, so I'll try and get them through them quickly. If anyone needs to go, let me know. The draft ordinance as it is, I do think it might make sense to have a subcommittee, which is like whatever's not a quorum of us, so anywhere between two and
Dan, could
3
you
people.
could you resend that too, because it
Yes.
was a long time ago and I'm not sure I know where it is.
I can do that. Yep.
Okay.
folder.
Yeah, we can hold it up to the screen and scan it.
Yeah.
No, I'll email that out.
Red and it was red and black.
Red and black. Yeah. And it's on Google, although I think the open meeting stuff about collaborating on a Google document is, am I right? Is that a little weird?
Yeah, it's not advised.
Not advised. Okay. Well, I could at least I could send it out as a Google Doc that's view only, so that people could.
Sure.
Oh, I think that lets you make comments on it, so, which is not advised.
Just don't make comments on it.
Don't make comments on it. Okay.
And we're fine.
But I do kind of like the idea of a subcommittee that's more than just a single person working on this in isolation. So is there anyone here who would be interested in doing some sort of more offline work on that? I'm certainly interested in that. Owen.
I'm happy to team up with you on that.
Tom. Okay. So maybe me, Tom, and Owen we can sort of, I mean, we could coordinate on a live Google Doc.
Sure.
And I like the idea of just getting that out into a full draft and then taking it from there, because editing is easier than creation. Are there, since the last meeting, I know the document there's no difference to it, but is there any discussion or question about next steps or thoughts about the ordinance that people feel like bringing up?
No, I just kind of feel that once we have the content, then we can to it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, the real thing is what needs to be in here, and the thing that will help us understand that the best is what are the things that need to be clarified. You know, and then once we figure out what are the decisions that we need to clarify, then, you know, it shouldn't be terribly difficult to just sort of write something that makes sure that all those things are clarified.
Right.
Unless I'm really overly simplistic about that.
And is simple.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, something that stood out to me about a lot of these other city ordinances is how short they are. I mean, I think there was one or two that was
Yes, some are enormous.
very long, but a lot of them are pretty brief. And I think brevity is good here. Okay, great. So me, Owen, and Tom I'll get us set up so that we can at least look at that and make comments on it. And then the last thing kind of that was on our agenda had to do with voter education and some brainstorming there. And this could certainly get tabled to future, because it's not the pressing concern. I was curious, Barbara, because I know that you as the clerk, send a lot of mail to residents. I was curious if that is able to be done at nonprofit rates through USPS as city business.
Well, they're really the only thing that we send out during the year is the census, and we send that out through LHS.
Oh, okay. So they handle all that.
Yeah. So we don't do any. I don't have any nonprofit rates or anything like that.
Okay.
All the big mailings that go out are done through vendors.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And so when you do like your own mailings, that's just at a normal USPS rate?
Yep. 65 cents a ballot.
Okay.
What I maybe just would encourage people to think about is sort of different ways that we can reach different kind of voters in their comfort zone. Like, maybe we want to do an in-person kind of, event where people can come and mark a ballot, or ask questions of people on the committee, or, maybe, we call up the newspaper and we ask them, are they interested in, writing about the new ordinance and the new upcoming whatever, stuff that we can kind of leverage, but that people might see in more than one place, so they're not wandering and they're all confused.
Right. Yeah, Owen.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sarah. We need to really make sure that we're catering to each of our demographics. But something else that I have pretty good information is that we have a whole city committee that is kind of designed around these sort of things, the Community Relations Committee, and kind of partnering with them to figure out, to kind of give this to them as an agenda item to, figure out how we can integrate with the community in regards to, education and exposure and such would be a great thing to give to them, and let them kind of run with it and brainstorm and come back to us, or one of us could sit in on those meetings. I know they're kind of looking for more to do, and I think this is kind of exactly what it was designed for. So I would encourage you to consider that.
Partnering with community resources in general. I mean, obviously you'd have to sit down and work out the details, but maybe, something could go home in kids' backpacks, which, could circumvent some postage costs or whatever. But, there's community resources we should think about.
Yeah, remember that part of our charge was to develop a budget. So if there are expenses, we got to keep that in mind too.
Sure.
Yeah, Owen.
I love Sarah's idea. If there's a way that we can integrate this into the schools and really educate our kids, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Another thing, kids can be educators on this, because, I don't know if you've met any of these high school kids. They're amazing. There's some really wonderful kids, and I think that they're excellent communicators. They're excellent technologically. They find this stuff interesting, and I bet that they could be really good outreach for us.
Yeah.
I've heard from a couple people, leading up to the ballot question, who were like, "Oh yeah, I didn't really get it, but then my kid explained it to me, and it seems like." So.
Well, I think that definitely this has to go way beyond us 6 or 7 people. Whether we take the Council on Aging, the school department, social media, the press, Nicole.
Oh yeah, she should do a mayor's update on it too. She'll do that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Owen, do you know anybody on that committee, the Relations Committee?
I do.
Okay.
One of them is within like 50 feet of me right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Maybe invite one of them over to one of our meetings, if that's cool with Dan and the rest of the committee.
It's absolutely cool with me.
Sure, and the chair is Jane Hamill, who I'm sure would love to sit in too. So yeah, if you want me to put the feelers out there, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Definitely.
One thing is that we also talked about was partnering potentially with businesses to have them do RCV ballots, in their stores that can really engage people. So
people went to stores.
well, yeah.
Remember places?
A little. Oh, I remember places.
So
You know where to discuss it in this house.
I have one question. You know, this is all good now, but I mean, like, we don't want to put this out too early. I think we're, you know, we got to get past this year, and in next year, I think right now we need to focus on getting our ordinance in order, and maybe look ahead to publicity, but you don't want to get stuff out there too soon.
No, I'm just thinking in terms of like an ideas bank. Like if somebody comes up with something good, we write it down. We talk about it a little bit. And I'm like, oh yeah, somebody thought that. And that's what I.
And it's a fun way of thinking about the issue of education, because I think more brainstorming is going to be necessary in this area than any of the other areas. And my main concern about it is budget, because if we are getting a budget in, I know that I mean I don't have a fine-grained view of how the budget cycle and process works in Easthampton, but I do assume that the sooner that we get any sort of budgetary request in, the more likely it will be to go through, and that these things take time. So that if we identify some stuff that we can put in as a request, then it feels like the sooner the better for that. I mean,
as far as the budget, I think if we in the fall can nail down the budget, that would be good, because you know what, Tom, I mean, I'm thinking like we got it kind of late this year, but I would say by December we should know what we want, what we're going to be looking for FY 22, FY 23.
Yeah. And we know there's $8,000 for licensing.
Yeah.
And we know that there's an ongoing $800 for licensing. But the better the idea we can get of anything before that. I mean, even if it's the cost of printing flyers that can be distributed at the school, you know, if we can itemize that stuff and have it in there, even if it's, you know, $300-400, whatever, like I think that's worth it. And having done this once before, I know exactly what it costs to send a piece of mail to everybody in the city. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, and we may even be able to work something out that makes it less expensive in terms of nonprofit, since this would be non-political, not related to a campaign. It would be informational. But that, you know, that cost with printing is somewhere in the $4,000 to $5,000 range. And that's, you know, that's something to keep in mind, because that's something that sits in people's living rooms. It shows up at their door. It's hard to ignore. Obviously, design and writing work and stuff that has to go into it. But I think it's an effective way of reaching everybody, whether or not they're on Facebook or not. So it's something to think about, and it's something that I think probably would work well. But I like the idea of sending a flyer home with kids from school, assuming school still exists, is something I hadn't even thought of, and that's a fantastic idea, and that could potentially save a lot of money on postage too.
Another thing we have to think about is, okay, the fiscal year 2021 starts in July, and we do have to have our budget in, but that's also when the nomination papers go out, and we're not going to know until September if we even have. I mean, there is a theoretical thing that we might not even have a ranked choice voting situation.
Right.
Or there might be it might just be for mayor. You know, we won't really know till September, even if we have a situation where we're even going to use it.
Right.
Just watch. I'm going to have 17 opponents.
I know you're going to go look for them too. And
But I've heard you publicly welcome opponents. So
multiple times.
Yeah. Oh, and I saw your hand. Sorry.
Just a statement and then a question. Just that, again, I support what other people have generally said here, that we probably have to start planning now. So when we are ready to implement, we have a plan and we have a budget and in place, so we can just, go ahead with that. So it's good to start talking now about what our plan's going to be there. And then, is there grant money or anything like that from any of the ranked choice voting organizations that help fund things like this?
Wonderful question. That would be a great question for the RCV Resource Center. You know, I can reach out to Voter Choice for Mass. I am hesitant to have any hopes about grants from them. They did give the campaign in Easthampton a grant for running the campaign and for some of those materials. But at this stage, I don't think that money. I think money is tighter for them, mostly because of COVID. But it can't hurt to reach out to them. Fair Vote, the national organization. There's other organizations like Represent Us that might have grants for this sort of thing. And not even just political organizations, because this is not the stage of a campaign, it's an educational thing. You know, there might be voting rights, get out the vote kinds of organizations that have grants. I think that's a fantastic idea. I saw Tom's hand.
Oh, the one thing is, well, I don't know if it'll really matter, but Voter Choice for Mass is the political organization, but there is an educational
Right.
C3 that's also there that maybe they'd have. I mean, I think they'd probably have a better idea of what their resources will be after November.
Sure.
But, you know, but I do think that while a lot of this is really preliminary and we don't want to start too soon, there's probably some value in at least brainstorming about it and sort of starting to build the relationships with people who are going to be interested in this stuff, or who are going to be asking to help out with education, you know, maybe around this time next year or a few months later.
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably some value in just sort of thinking about, like, who are we going to want to talk to and what exactly do we want from them, so that we're not making those calls in like late October.
Yep.
But yeah,
I love the idea of coordinating with the community outreach committee, and I think that would be a great thing to add as a agenda item to a future meeting. So feel free. All right, it's getting on 7:30, so I do want to at least make an attempt to wrap things up. Do folks have any new business that they want to bring up or have added to this or future meetings? Cool. All right, let's schedule our next meeting. So I think we're looking at May, and the third Thursday would be the
21st.
21st. Yeah. Does that?
Actually, that's my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
I don't know. I mean, if it works, I don't, nobody goes places, but you know, I don't know.
Have a Zoom birthday party. We can all bring our
I'll
own
just be like
cupcakes.
cramming sushi in my mouth in front of you all.
Yeah.
Up to you all.
Well, let's see. There's also the 28th, or there is the 14th, if Thursdays are still reasonably good.
The 14th may not work for me. The 28th
Okay.
probably would be fine.
The
The
28th
my
sounds
wedding.
good to me, because
Okay.
I have an election, a city council
Yep.
meeting, and this.
Yep.
Oh, and on the 19th, the week of the
On the
19th.
19th, 20th, 21st. I'd
Yep.
vote for the 28th.
28th.
The
Yeah,
28th is my
parking-
wedding anniversary, but
Oh, well, the 20th is mine, so celebrate that at our council meeting.
the 20th is my engagement anniversary.
Oh, 20 years, 20 years.
Wow.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Congrats. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have to meet on a Thursday.
Right. That's
Yep.
just,
Thursday.
27th?
Yeah. How about a Friday? Friday the.
Oh. No.
Oh, sorry. Monday the 25th.
Yeah, could do that.
Memorial Day.
How about the
Oh, yeah, that's
27th?
Memorial Day, the 25th.
How about the 27th?
I'd
The
do it.
Wednesday. Wednesday's good.
Wait, 27th. The 27th. I don't see any reason why wait, is that a city council? No.
No.
Okay, then
right?
we should be fine, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because council's the, yeah.
For first and third.
Okay.
Right, yeah. So then that should be fine as long as it's fine with everyone else.
Okay. So Wednesday, the 27th, 6 p.m. We're gonna probably assume that it's gonna be a Zoom meeting, but we will play it by ear and see what's up. And
Did we reach out to Jeff? Do we need, as far as him being there or giving us something or whatever?
I can follow up with Jeff about the
Okay.
the the screenshot of that listing stuff, just to keep on top of it.
You
with
will?
him.
You will?
Yeah, I'm happy to follow
Okay.
up on that.
All right.
Yeah, Owen.
What do you want to do about the ordinance subcommittee?
Right. So what I think I'll do is I'll email you and Tom so that we have a little email thread going, and I can share the Google Doc so that we can comment on it and edit it as a subcommittee. Cool.
Okay.
All right, guys. I think, do we have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Bye.
Meeting adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Well,
Right.
All right, thank you all.
geez.
Bye-bye.